Hey everyone, thank you for being here. Today I'm going to be doing another voiceover video, and I thought that it would be really interesting to talk about friendship breakups. We hear a lot about relationship breakups, but not as much about friendship breakups. So I thought, why not discuss some questions that we can ask ourselves when we have experienced the breakdown of a friendship? I'm going to get straight in. The first question would be, what led to the breakdown of the friendship? Sometimes that's a really straightforward question to answer because you had an argument, you fell out over something, there was something very evident that happened that led to the breakdown of the friendship. And sometimes you might not be too sure. Sometimes you might all of a sudden be met with animosity, or maybe you've been cut off without any notice and it's kind of happened all of a sudden and you don't know where this came from. If you're not sure, what you could start to do is think about, when did the relationship start to break down? This might require you to go back over messages. And if you're in this position, then this is probably something you've already done. If you've been left with quite a confusing ending, as if you've almost been ghosted by your friend, you may need to look back over the last conversations you had. Think about the most recent interactions you've had with them and see if there was anything that stood out to you. Was there an argument? Was there a little remark that didn't sit right with you? Look back, check your messages, and see if there's anything you can remember that can give you an indication of what may have went wrong. I think on some level, when you are just cut off without really knowing what the issue was, it can be really difficult, and it's quite unfair that you're left with having to do detective work on what happened. But sometimes that is how situations play out. If it's important for you to know what led to the breakdown of this friendship, then that might be something you need to do a bit of digging around. Moving on to the second question, did you communicate your feelings and concerns effectively? So a lot of the times we are experiencing things in our friendships and our relationships, and we're almost suffering in silence. We have this reluctance to speak about what we need, to speak about how we feel, and to share when something hurts us. And there can be so many different reasons why we respond in this way. A lot of the times we're just not taught how to do that. We're not taught how to really have conflict resolution, how to speak to someone in a way that you're able to get your point across, in a way that is also not just pointing a finger at someone else and leading them to get quite defensive and have their back up, which often leads to the conversation not really going anywhere, nothing really being solved. There's so much deeper you can go with these questions as well, of working out, is that something you do in other relationships? Do you communicate your feelings? Do you communicate well? Do you know how to speak up for yourself and advocate for yourself when you're experiencing something you don't like? In friendships, we're working with different people, and sometimes things are not that straightforward, and we all have our individual perspectives. So just because you've explained something and you've communicated something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be understood. And this is why people often say communication is key, but comprehension is key, because it doesn't really matter how much or what you've said to somebody if they're not capable of understanding, or if they're not trying to understand. The third question would be, were there unresolved conflicts or misunderstandings? Sometimes we have things happening and we are really impacted by things in quite a negative way. We might be experiencing a lot of hurt. We might be experiencing disloyalty, betrayal, so many different things we could be experiencing that have been unresolved. And it goes back to my point of, we often don't know how to resolve conflicts in our relationships. We often don't know how to come to a solution and come to an understanding. We move on with the relationship and we continue acting as normal, but deep down there might be a degree of resentment. You might be carrying hurt of things that have happened in the past that haven't been addressed, and those things can often impact and lead to the eventual breakdown of a relationship if they're not addressed. And so sometimes, even though we want to avoid the uncomfortability of having awkward conversations and bringing our raw emotion to another person, in that avoidance we end up losing them. We end up losing the friendship that maybe could have been repaired over time with some work on the side of both parties. But when we refuse to do that, the relationship is tainted, and you're carrying all of these feelings, and we think that when we suppress our emotions, they're gone, as in they've disappeared into the abyss, but really they're just deeper in your subconscious and they're playing out in all of your interactions anyway. It makes more sense just to have the conversation. And there's a way to go about that as well. There's a way to address your concerns in a kind way, in an empathic way, and in a way that is looking for the solution as opposed to looking to blame someone or to bring someone else down, because we have a nature to be very defensive. And when we feel like someone is calling us out on our shit, it's the last thing we want to hear. Whenever you feel like that, your back is going to be up. If you're not going to be very receptive to the information you're receiving, if you feel like all fingers are being pointed at you. Now, moving on to the next question. Did the friendship align with my values and priorities? And here's the thing. Sometimes we are in friendships and relationships that actually don't align with us, that don't really serve us. And maybe they are friendships out of convenience. Maybe they are friendships out of, well, we went to school together, I've known her for a long time. Maybe they're so close to you in terms of you have a lot of mutual friends, you share the same spaces, you work together, you're in business together, you study together. And even though these are reasons for maybe starting a friendship, it doesn't mean that they're strong enough to maintain a friendship. dive into these friendships and really think about whether you were aligned with these people. Do you have the same ideas about what friendship should look like? Do you communicate in a similar way? I remember I had a friend who I've actually now experienced a friendship breakup with, and whenever I'd call her and she'd miss my call, she'd text me back, which I always found really strange. I suppose I took it as a form of rejection, because if I've called you, it means I want to talk to you. If I wanted to text you, I would text you. Little things like that can really cause to the breakdown of a friendship as well, because if we communicate differently, if it's almost like we're speaking a different language. How important is it for you to spend time with that friend? How important is it for you to have one-on-one time, for you to catch up on the phone, for you to see each other in person? How important is it for me to know what's going on in your life? What is a priority for you right now? Is your romantic relationship more of a priority? Do you have things going on with your family? Are you studying right now and so you haven't had as much time for the relationship? Going forward as well, finding friends that do align with your values and your priorities. Sometimes as we get older, we don't want to go out as much, or the places that we want to go out to are different now. Maybe you used to rave together and go out on Friday nights and Saturday nights, but maybe now you prefer to be indoors more. Maybe now you have children, and having children changes the dynamic of a friendship. Getting into a new relationship or getting married, having a baby, moving house, all of these things can really impact a friendship. Check in periodically on whether friendships are still serving you. I know a lot of us, I know I'm speaking for myself here, are quite sensitive, even though we try to hide it and we try to mask it, and often we have our defenses up. But I'm very sensitive, and I know sometimes the smallest things can really hurt me, and I can take things quite personally at times. So sometimes taking a objective view of the situation, taking yourself out of the picture and just looking at the situation very objectively, has something changed? Maybe it's not that the relationship isn't serving you anymore, you're not aligned. Maybe it's just circumstantial and things are going on in your life or their life. So that's something to think about as well. For my journaling girlies, those who like to self-reflect a bit more, how do you feel about the loss of this friendship? Here's the thing. When friendships end, we can experience so many different emotions, and sometimes we go from one emotion to another emotion, and sometimes we're experiencing so many different emotions all at once, ranging from sadness to anger to maybe even jealousy to confusion. And it's also really important not to judge how you feel. Sometimes we're experiencing a level of denial. Sometimes we feel a sense of relief. Some friendships become so burdensome and so misaligned that you experience a lot of peace when the friendship ends, which is an indication of maybe this friendship was no longer serving you. Maybe it was about time that the relationship ended, and there needs to be a degree of detachment that is needed in order to go your separate paths. This is the thing, we don't stay the same, we're constantly evolving. Just like nature goes through its seasons, we also go through seasons, we also change. And sometimes people can no longer stay in our lives, and we need to learn to let go. Some of us try to hold on too much to people, and some of us don't hold on enough. Let's talk about that as well. Some of us are so quick to cut people off without even trying to communicate, without understanding, without having empathy for whatever they may be going through, without even seeing other perspectives. Some of us just take one thing that we've seen or we've heard and we run with it, blow things out of proportion, and then before we know it, we have no friends left because we're constantly cutting people off. So there's a balance. Another question that you can ask yourself, which is also really good for journaling, is, are there any patterns or reoccurring issues in your friendships? So sometimes we realize that maybe we've lost a lot of friends. Maybe a lot of people have stopped speaking to us out of the blue. We could benefit from doing some self-reflection on that. Maybe you have a lot of friends that say to you the same sort of things, or, whether it's you're always cancelling on us, we don't see you enough, we don't hear from you enough, or I don't know, this random one that just popped into my head, you're always embarrassing me in front of other people. I remember I had a friend when I was younger, and whenever we were around boys, she'd always do something to try to embarrass me, which I always found really strange. But, we have these strange dynamics sometimes and these strange things going on in our friendships. Notice the patterns of the people that you choose as friends, and also for yourself. How do you show up as a friend? What are your values as a friend? What does it mean to be a friend to someone? A lot of us haven't really been taught about this. I think sometimes, depending on your household, some of us don't have older siblings, some of us didn't really have parents that spoke to us about certain things. Some of us grew up with really emotionally unavailable parents, and so that plays out in our friendships and our relationships. So getting a good understanding of how you relate to others, how you are received by others as well, can be really helpful in maintaining relationships and understanding what may have gone wrong in some of these relationships. Leading on to my next question, what lessons can I learn from this experience? I'm a big believer in two things. everything happens for a reason. And 2, everything is always working out for my good. That's one of my affirmations and my life mantras. Everything is always working out for my good. So even though you may be experiencing a level of heartbreak, confusion, pain, how is the situation serving you and what can you learn from this experience? No matter how painful and how hurtful something is, there's always something that you can learn from this experience, and creating the space and the time to see what lessons you can take from this, what you can learn about yourself, what you can learn about others, what you can learn about how we relate to each other, and what you need going forward. What types of connections serve you? What connections bring you joy, bring you peace, bring you happiness? What kind of things do you want to be doing with your friends? Where do you want to go with your friends? What does friendship mean to you? Were you in the wrong? Did you mishandle a situation that you could have done better at? There are so many lessons, and sometimes we just need to be still and spend time with ourselves to work out, what am I missing here? What can I gain from this experience in terms of knowledge to move forward with, knowledge to heal and to grow and to change for the better. If you are in the middle of a friendship breakup, if this is something really raw and new and recent for you right now, you want to also think about how can you prioritize self-care and healing during this time. So even though you may be experiencing this breakup, how can you look after yourself? How can you make sure that you're doing the best to take care of yourself while you're feeling quite fragile, while you're feeling broken? What can you do to pour into yourself to help you to manage this situation? I really swear by journaling. I think journaling is a great way to express what's going on for you without the need of speaking to another person. You can just lay it all out on the paper. You don't need to worry about anyone judging you. You don't need to worry about taking up someone's time or their energy. And it's a really good way to learn more about yourself as well and to connect with yourself on a deeper level. You might also want to think about other relationships that you have, whether that's with your parents, other friends you have, family members, children. Maybe it's time to prioritize some of these other relationships, and it serves as a reminder that you do have people around you that love you and care for you. And if you feel like you don't have that, you do have yourself, and you can still pour love into yourself. You can still take care of yourself and be gentle with yourself and be compassionate as well. There's also universal love. There's also the love of God. Maybe it's time to tap into that as well. Maybe it's time to experience healing in a spiritual sense. Sometimes it is a call for something to change. And so seeing how your life can possibly improve off the back of this breakup, which might sound quite crazy to someone who's really experiencing a lot of raw emotion and heartbreak and pain off the loss of a friend. But there's always the yin and the yang. There's always the other side of the coin. So what good can come out of this situation? Has it now opened up space for new connections, for connections that serve you, new friendships? What has come out of this, and how can you heal and move forward? So I'm hoping that these questions can help you to gain some clarity and to process your emotions, to be able to move forward in a healthy way. And I'm hoping that whatever it is you might be feeling in this moment, that you give yourself grace and that you're patient with yourself, and know that you can't control anybody else. I don't want to ramble on anymore, so I'm going to leave the video here. Thank you for tuning in, and I will speak to you in the next one.